November 16th, 2018. A 26-year-old American kneels on the floor of a small fishing boat, writing in his journal by flashlight. The sea around him is black. The island ahead is darker. His name is John Allen Chow. He is a missionary, an adventurer, a man who genuinely believes he is doing God's work. And tonight, he is about to paddle alone toward the most dangerous beach on the planet. He writes, "Lord, is this island Satan's last stronghold, where none have heard or even had the chance to hear your name?" He doesn't know that tomorrow his body will be dragged across the sand by arrows. He doesn't know that the fishermen watching from the boat will be the last people to see him alive. He doesn't know that within days his death will make headlines across the world and reignite a question that humanity has been asking for centuries. The island has no airports, no roads, no internet, no name that its people have ever spoken to an outsider. It is called North Sentinel Island. It sits in the Bay of Bengal. It is roughly the size of Manhattan, and it is the last place on Earth where a group of human beings have successfully refused to join the modern world, not for years, not for decades, but for an estimated 60,000 years. Every attempt to reach them has ended in silence, violence, or death. But here's what nobody talks about. The real mystery of North Sentinel Island is not what's on the island. The real mystery is what we were thinking when we kept trying to get in. To understand North Sentinel Island, you first have to forget everything you know about geography. Forget Google Maps. Forget satellite images. And forget the idea that in the 21st century, no place on Earth can truly be unknown. Because North Sentinel Island exists in a category of its own. From the air, it looks almost dreamlike. Dense jungle presses all the way to the water's edge. Coral reefs circle the island like a moat. The beaches are white. The trees are ancient. And the whole place shimmers under the Indian Ocean sun like something out of a story that was never meant for you. But get any closer, and the dream turns cold. The Indian government has established a 3-mile exclusion zone around the island. Military patrol boats enforce it. It is illegal, a criminal offense, to approach North Sentinel Island. The law exists not to protect visitors from the island. The law exists to protect the island from visitors, because there is something about a forbidden place that short-circuits human reason. Something about a door that says, "Do not open," that makes every hand reach for the handle. The Andaman Islands, the chain of which North Sentinel is a part, were once described by early Arab traders as islands of cannibals and demons. Medieval maps placed sea monsters in these waters. Marco Polo called the people here dog-headed and ferocious. None of that was true, of course, but fear has a way of outliving its source. What is true is this: the island is real, the people are real, and their message to the outside world, delivered through arrows, through silence, through the bodies of those who ignored the warning, has been remarkably consistent. Leave us alone. The question is why. We call them the Sentinelese. That is not what they call themselves. We don't know what they call themselves. We don't know their language. Not a single word of it has ever been recorded or understood. Every linguist who has studied the Andaman Islands has concluded that Sentinelese is so isolated, so ancient, that it shares no known root with any other language on Earth. We don't know how many of them there are. Estimates range from as few as 40 to as many as 500. No census has ever been taken. No drone has ever captured a clear count. We don't know their beliefs. We don't know their social structure. And we don't know how they govern themselves, how they mourn their dead, how they celebrate, how they name their children, or whether they have any concept of what lies beyond their shoreline. We know they fish. We know they hunt. We know they build fires on the beach at night. We know they can craft weapons with extraordinary precision. Their arrows have been found to travel over 300 feet with lethal accuracy. And we know that for 60,000 years, through ice ages and empires and world wars, through the rise and fall of every civilization humanity has ever built, they have been there. They are not primitive. That word carries the assumption that our path is the only path, that civilization has a single direction, and they simply haven't reached our stop yet. The Sentinelese didn't fall behind. They made a choice, or their ancestors made it for them, and every generation since has defended that choice with their lives. The reason for that choice is written in blood, and it begins long before John Allen Chow ever picked up a paddle. The first recorded outside contact with the Sentinelese was in 1867, when a merchant ship called the Nineveh ran aground on the island's coral reef. The crew survived the wreck and made it to shore. For several days, nothing happened. They collected water. They rested. They must have thought they'd been lucky. Then, on the third day, the Sentinelese attacked. The crew fought them off with firearms and was eventually rescued by a Royal Navy vessel. The incident was filed away. The island was mapped. The people were noted. And the British Empire, with the peculiar confidence of an empire that believed it owned everything it could see, decided that the Sentinelese needed to be civilized. The colonial kidnapping, 1880. In 1880, British officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an expedition to North Sentinel Island. He landed with a full party, searched the interior, and found the island largely deserted. The Sentinelese had vanished into the jungle, but not entirely. Portman's men captured 6 Sentinelese people, an elderly man, an elderly woman, and 4 children. They were taken to Port Blair, the British colonial capital of the Andamans. The elderly couple died almost immediately, of disease, most likely. Their immune systems had never encountered anything the modern world carried. The 4 children were given gifts and returned to the island. Portman wrote in his report that the expedition had been largely a failure. He seems not to have considered what message the return of 4 orphaned children carrying British diseases might have sent to the people watching from the trees. The 20th century, gifts and arrows. Decades passed. The island remained closed. Anthropologists debated whether contact should be attempted. The Indian government, after independence, went back and forth. In the 1960s and 70s, a series of contact expeditions were launched. The approach was gentle. Small boats, slow movement, gifts left on the beach, coconuts, red cloth, plastic toys. Sometimes the Sentinelese accepted the gifts. Sometimes they came to the water's edge and seemed almost curious. And then the arrows would come. One of the most telling moments occurred during a National Geographic expedition in 1974. A filmmaker was shot in the thigh with an arrow while standing on the beach. The footage made international news. The wound was not fatal, the message was. By the 1990s, Indian anthropologist T.N. Pandit had become one of the few outsiders to get close to the Sentinelese without triggering immediate violence. His team made dozens of contact visits over several years, always by boat, always with gifts. There were moments that felt like breakthrough. A young Sentinelese man once waded into the surf and seemed to pantomime eating, touching his mouth. Pandit's team tossed coconuts. The young man caught them. It felt like the beginning of something. Then, in 1996, the Indian government officially stopped the contact program. The risk, they decided, was too great, not just for the visitors, but for the Sentinelese themselves, because of the disease problem, because of what happens to isolated populations when the outside world finally arrives. History had already shown them what that looked like. It was not a story with a happy ending. John Allen Chau grew up in Vancouver, Washington. He was athletic, curious, deeply religious, and by all accounts, a genuinely kind person. He was also, by the time he was a teenager, obsessed with North Sentinel Island. He studied survival skills. He trained in wilderness medicine. He learned basic linguistics. He believed with absolute conviction that the Sentinelese were living in spiritual darkness, that they had never heard the gospel, and that it was his calling to bring it to them. His church community encouraged him. His mentor warned him. The Indian government had made his plan illegal, and he went anyway. Chau had visited the Andaman Islands at least twice before his final trip. He had made contact with local fishermen who, for payment, agreed to take him close to the island. On November 14, 2018, he paddled to the shore in a kayak. The Sentinelese met him on the beach. He held out fish as a gift. He began speaking, attempting to communicate. A young Sentinelese boy shot him with an arrow. The arrow pierced his Bible. He retreated to the boat. He wrote in his journal that night. He admitted he was terrified. He admitted he didn't know if he would survive. And then he wrote that he was going back. Do not let this fish and these Sentinelese people die without hearing the name of Jesus. He paddled back to the island the next morning. The fishermen watched from a distance. They saw figures on the beach. They saw what appeared to be a struggle. They saw Chau's body being dragged across the sand. They did not go closer. They left. John Allen. Chau's body remains on North Sentinel Island. He is, in a way, the last person to have been accepted there, and his death, which shocked the world, which was mourned and debated and argued over, forced a question that nobody in the conversation wanted to ask. What if he was wrong? Not about God, not about faith, about the Sentinelese. Let's slow down, because we have been telling this story as if the danger flows in one direction, as if the Sentinelese are the threat, as if they are the ones with something to answer for. But look at the history again. Every time the outside world made contact with an isolated indigenous population, every single time the outcome for that population was catastrophic. The Taino of the Caribbean encountered Columbus in 1492, effectively extinct within 50 years. The Yahi of California encountered American settlers in the 1800s, reduced from thousands to a single man named Ishi, who walked out of the wilderness in 1911 and died of tuberculosis 5 years later. The Awaguaja of Brazil, contacted in the 1970s and 80s. Population has been declining ever since. In the Amazon, contact with uncontacted tribes has caused death rates of up to 50% in the first year, not from violence, from disease, measles, influenza, the common cold, illnesses that isolated immune systems have never encountered and cannot fight. When John Allen Chau paddled to that beach, he was not just carrying a Bible. He was carrying every bacteria and virus his body had accumulated in 26 years of living in the modern world. The Sentinelese who chased him away were not acting out of hatred or superstition. They were, on some level, consciously or not acting out of survival. The arrow through the Bible was not a rejection of God. It was a rejection of us. And here is the most uncomfortable part of this story. The Sentinelese are right. Every piece of evidence, every historical parallel, every epidemiological model says the same thing. The greatest threat to the Sentinelese people is contact with anyone, for any reason. Their hostility, the very thing that makes us call them dangerous, the very thing that has kept the outside world at arm's length, is the only thing that has kept them alive. We have been so focused on whether we could reach them that we never stopped to ask whether we should. And sitting with that question, really sitting with it, changes everything about this story. Tonight on North Sentinel Island, fires are burning on the beach. The people who lit them do not know your name. They do not know what year it is. They have never heard of the internet or nuclear weapons or climate change or streaming platforms or the particular loneliness of living in a world where everyone is connected and almost no one feels known. They have never had to wonder whether their life has meaning. They have never had to perform themselves for an audience. They have never been sold something they didn't need or told they weren't enough. They wake up in the same world their grandparents woke up in, and their grandparents before them, stretching back so far that the word history stops meaning anything. I'm not romanticizing their life. I don't know enough about it to romanticize it. Neither do you. Neither does anyone. That's the point. The Sentinelese represent something that our civilization, in its relentless forward motion, has almost entirely eliminated. Genuine mystery. A life lived entirely outside the reach of our assumptions, our categories, our desires to document and explain and consume. There is a satellite image of North Sentinel Island taken from space. In it, you can see the jungle, the reef, the white fringe of beach. And if you look carefully, impossibly carefully, you can sometimes see tiny figures on the sand. They are standing at the water's edge, looking out. We will never know what they see when they look. Maybe that's exactly how it should be.